role players are here. So the webinar is being recorded. The people involved include, obviously, the people arranging this are the Parkhurst Residents and Business Owners Association, and you'll meet Mike later. Myself as chairs of the Greenside Residents Association. We've also been working closely with Emmarentia Residents Association, the Parkview Community Policing Forum, and we all gathered together quite informally initially last year under the banner of Save Our Spruit to try and really get some action going in a consolidated way. We have been endorsed by, and really enthusiastically and supportively, by the Melville, Craig Park, Parkview, and Parktown North. Just to add that in, we didn't put it in the slide. The Parktown North Residents Association have all shown support, and we're grateful to that. We have some attorneys that have been working pro bono. They're based locally, and they'll speak a bit later and introduce themselves. The other role players who may be doing and not doing stuff include the City of Johannesburg and some of their what are called municipal-owned entities. Those are parts of the city that operate under various departments. For example, City Parks and Zoo, they have their own board of directors. JRA is one of the MOEs, and the one most important for us is the Johannesburg Property Company, which is tasked with managing the city's property portfolio. And included in that, for our purposes tonight, are both the property that Pirates Club sits on, and the Pick It Up Dump, and the Bowls Club. There are other departments that have been involved. Some have been more active than others. For example, the JMPD, who the city's policing department, environmental health, who have really done their best when we've asked them to go and look at burning, toxics, fumes, litter. They all feel, we'll talk about, quite hamstrung by other issues, land use, development planning, etc. There are various integrated service delivery bodies that we deal with, ward councillors who cannot tell the city what to do. They just have an oversight and communication role, but they are not able to order the city to do anything. And then, of course, people ask a lot about SAPS. SAPS are a provincial body. They also have some oversight to do with the property, but are also obviously struggle sometimes because of some of the legal issues about who owns the property, who can be moved and who can't be in relation to the constitution and the law of the country. So just some history. This was prepared by Tim Truelach. I'm going to go through it pretty briefly, but just to say that the property, the site is owned by the Johannesburg Property Company, and that at some point, I think about 2008, 2009, a functioning bowls and soccer club that was running there closed down. I'm not sure why, I wasn't involved. And there were people living in the domestic quarters of the bowls and soccer club, but the clubhouse was empty. There was nobody else living there. And in 2013, the first tender proposal issued by the JPC, the Johannesburg Property Company, went out. Within a year, it had failed. We're not sure why. There may be, and we'll talk about this, we have asked the city to explain. There are multiple and various reasons. It's unclear. Then they started another process, hiring consultants to develop the land, setting up a working group. And I believe that was going quite well in 2015, 2016. A lot of people in the questions and the petition referred to wastepreneurs. Wastepreneurs is not a city project. Wastepreneurs is a private social, like a corporate social responsibility project run by and funded by the AdReach Foundation, which is part of AdReach Media. They established themselves next to the Pick It Up Garden site, which is a city property on Pirates Club land leased from the Johannesburg Property Company. It's directly opposite the Bowls Club property. There are lots of legal issues regarding wastepreneurs that are ongoing. We are aware of them. We are consulting with Pirates who site they're on, but we understand that there has been a kind of secondary issue with the wastepreneurs and waste pickers on the Bowls Club site across the road. So people started living in the Bowls Club and the clubhouse of the Bowls Club. And at some point, I'm not sure why, allegedly the residents of Quinn Street declined an offer by the property company to demolish the clubhouse. It's unclear to me what that was about, but there suddenly consultation stopped, and a second tender was issued, and the city said the tender bidder, the winning tender bidder has to remove the illegal occupants. Again, that process, within 3 years, it went back and forwards apparently at various city committees. It got stalled. Nobody understands why, or I don't understand why. We will maybe have to ask for more information with a PIA or PADGA application. But what happened was we started seeing more and more people living informally under the trees opposite the garden site, attracted possibly by the wastepreneur site. We believe that that's part of what happened. Just to say that it's not just waste pickers who've been living at the site. There are car guards, there are people doing probably illegal activities, people who are begging. There's a variety of activity growing on that site. But by 2019, the second tender was abandoned. Then there was an idea to let city parks use the soccer field to solarize trees or wood that had shot hole borer. And City Parks again was told that they would have to rehome people living there. We know that, and anyone who's ever done a Google search on JPC or looked at the Carte Blanche episode about it will know that there are a lot of corruption scandals, lots of problem with their board, and allegations made about some of their management, and that was awful. So 2020, there seemed to be problems with them. Another tender was issued. Again, you know, COVID happened. The city really ground to a halt and nothing much happened, but the numbers of homeless people everywhere rocketed, and people were moving into spaces. So the city parks let go of the solarization. They felt that they couldn't manage the people living there. And this is just, the picture on your screen is just a drone view of the site with the Bowls Club clubhouse, and you can see like a whole lot of burning material and litter. So we're still waiting. 2021, the JPC tried to get an eviction order. They claimed there were only 22 people living at the site on the time, but the occupiers of the site went to court and got an interdict because the city did not follow due process. The city has to, by law, whether we like it or not, and I know some of you cannot believe that the city has to do this, but the law of the country is that if somebody's been living on a site for more than actually a few months, you have to offer them, or a few weeks even, you have to offer them permanent, a temporary emergency accommodation in terms of the law. And the city just didn't do that. So the eviction order failed. At some point, I know Trim Trulak and the Community Development Department of the city were trying to get a soccer club to develop the site. At the last minute, the property company, for also reasons that are unclear, refused it and issued a fourth tender. And this failed again. And then in May 2023, PRABOA initiated a court action to demand that the city do what it was supposed to do in 2021 and audit how many people are living on the site and audit how much temporary emergency accommodation they need to provide and where it's going to be. They only did the audit on the site in August of 2023. And I think at the time they started saying there were 80 people just in the, but this is people now living in the clubhouse and alongside it and moving down to the river. And word started getting out. There was a rumor that if people go there, they will get housing. More and more shacks appear and the numbers are growing. And the fifth tender, which was issued in September 2023, we are waiting the outcome. I've said that lots has already been done. There have been legal processes that PRABOA have undertaken and that Johannesburg Property Company started, but have not been able to follow through on for whatever reason. They have to answer to that. They couldn't, in a meeting we had with them, explain why. The Residents Association, ward councillors, businesses, residents on their own back, the CPF, the Parkview CPF, have engaged with multiple entities. I submitted alongside with the petition document a huge portfolio of evidence, which I can make available to anyone who wants to go into the Google Drive to look at it, of letters, emails, affidavits, by whether it's the Quinn Street residents, Greenside residents, Parkhurst residents. It's a fortune of very, very frustrating reading. And we've engaged with all of these people ongoing. The CPF organized a public meeting at Marks Park to look at the issue of displaced people and illegal occupiers. And we know that SAPS, Crumb, JMPD have done some raids, cleanups, and inspections, but not enough was being done, and the situation was getting worse. So we started a petition. Some people said, why only now? Well, you know, I can't explain why 5 years ago during lockdown I wasn't thinking of it, or I didn't realize we could do it. But it came to us that this was really an opportunity. We are not naive. We don't think that just because the executive mayor and the city manager get a petition from 3,000 people living in Parkhurst, Greenside, Victory Park, etc., they're going to suddenly jump. But they have a little bit. I do think they've blinked. But we're not naive. We didn't think it was magic. But what we knew is that we weren't getting anywhere fast enough with just the complaints, registering, getting reference numbers, making individual complaints. We knew that we had to consolidate our protest, both as RAs and work together, which is really, I think, the way we're going to go. I think many of you are going to hear a lot more about, for example, Greenside, and I think even PRABOA supporting and joining the Joburg Can initiatives to work together. We wanted to consolidate. We wanted to give people who are living in the area, who are so frustrated, so angry, a voice, an opportunity to be heard. We wanted to draw attention from the city and from other role players to this issue, and to tick our boxes, so that if we go to court, if we go to the Human Rights Commission, if whatever we do moving forward, we can say we exhausted every avenue. We followed the due process. So the petition went to the city mayor, the city manager, and the executive mayor, because they are the managers. They are responsible for all the entities. And we asked them to take action and to decisively address the illegal occupation, the environmental destruction, and the social crisis, because for the people who are occupying the property, they live in the most dire circumstances. And our constitution says that the government has to provide dignity to all. This is not a dignified way to live. And the city has failed to manage or clean or secure or protect the site. And it is a social crisis felt by all living in the area. I just think we need to contextualize what has happened. That also, especially post-COVID or during COVID, homelessness, people living rough, is a global phenomenon. It's not just a Johannesburg or South African one. So it's a global. That nationally there are structural issues in our country, and we all know this, around poverty, inequality, problems with public transport. People can't live near their work. There are informal economies that are not properly regulated. And then we get waste pickers that both do a good job but also cause a huge amount of problems. Those are national issues that are like really big to deal with. And of course, they're provincial and city issues. And we have to think about who's running the city. We have had an unstable coalition government. We have had, I think, really, or we have been the victims of terrible political manipulations. I think historically there's been a lack of political will to address the issue of the Bowls Club. We worry about corruption all the time. I hear gossip, I hear rumor. I haven't got any evidence. If anyone's got evidence, please bring it to us. We'll try to be whistleblowers. And of course, the city keeps telling us they have a lack of money to do things. I think there is a misappropriation of money, and money gets misspent. But, you know, if they say they haven't got money, we have to audit that. We have to be vigilant. That's some of our work we're going to be doing with the Joburg Can and Outer. There also, we have a lack of money as RAs to do things. And that's part of what we're relying on the community, is to provide financial, legal, and capacity, because we're constrained with small committees who are trying to deal with a huge amount. And we are all volunteers. And we've all felt beleaguered, and I think at times really, really unfairly treated. I say feeling quite sorry for myself at times. But I think that it's really important to remember that we all operate under the laws of the country. And there are legal constraints about just pulling in red ants or people to just go and demolish things. We need to be mindful. So the petition, as I hope all of you've seen it, and it was also reported in the press, but we asked the city to make sure that they clean, maintain, secure the site, to expedite the sale or lease process, and then they issued the tender, and to provide the temporary emergency accommodation and prevent the establishment of further unlawful occupation. And we asked them to respond in writing, and we gave them some timelines. And so far, the only timeline they've met so far is that they responded in writing that they've got the petition, but they still have time. I mean, they've still got, I think, another week before we start asking for written feedback, and we will be on them. But just to say what we found in the petition, and I personally, over December, in my holidays, read through every single comment that people put on that petition. And there were 2,942 individual signatories, and lots of people made long, long comments. I have to say, I am a psychologist in my private and professional life, and boy, did I need trauma debriefing after reading how desperate people feel and how awful it is. And I know it. I've seen all the photographs. That's a photograph of the kind of litter that we see on the site. So I just want to tell you, I was doing my honors project again or something. I aggregated all the comments and I put them under major themes, and I submitted this as an appendix with our petition. And these were concerns and personal experiences of criminal activities originating from the site. And here I really want to thank SAPS and the CPF for helping us also get the statistics about how much criminal activity there is around the site. Often petty crime, people on foot. We know that stolen goods are found on the site, for example, cables. And so thanks to the CPF and SAPS for supporting us in getting that information. There were a lot, what surprised me actually, because clearly I work from home, so I'm not on the road as much. Lots and lots of concerns about traffic and safety. People commenting that there are always people loitering, drunkenly often, also crossing between both the pick-it-up dump and the wastepreneur site to the bowls club, people just meandering. Two different people commented that they'd hit people, and we know that one person was killed on that road. So it's a huge problem in terms of traffic and unsafe driving. And also people feel very afraid. There are fire and safety risks. We know that people are making fires in the veld. We've had a number of fires go, even after that Albert Street fire in town. About a week later, suddenly there was a huge fire at the Bowls Club that did get put out. But it's a huge risk, and people are making open fires inside of the bowling clubhouse, the clubhouse structure, which of course is undermining and weakening that structure and possibly could collapse onto people. And there are, we know, children living often on that site. There are health risks, not just for the people living on the site, but for all of us. The waste that's being sorted and abandoned and burnt is making noxious fumes. It is going into the Spruit. It is left around. It's absolutely awful. And members of my RA and the CPF and the patrollers, the SAPS patrollers who have gone onto the site to do inspections have spoken about how awful the site smells, the piles of litter and rubbish. It's really just awful. We know that there's environmental degradation. We know that there's been a negative impact on businesses in the area, into Parkhurst and Victory Park and Greenside, and negative impact on property values without a doubt. All the estate agents have told us that any properties nearby the site are really devalued because of that proximity. And that is going to spread into the suburb. It's not going to, if there becomes a fully fledged informal community there, it doesn't just affect the one row of houses nearby. People are really worried about the growth and unmanaged spread of this problem, which is like literally daily. Yesterday, and I want to thank whoever it was who filmed someone in a Fortuna dropping off big pieces of wood with impunity during the broad daylight for people who were taking it off the bucky, the trailer, and moving it into the Bowls Club area to erect a shack. And thanks then to JMPD, I think it was 2 days ago actually, who actually organizing visits. But there's other issues I'll tell you about. It's got a negative impact on what we call amenity, the quality of our lives. People don't want to walk around. Nobody wants to walk around Sir Lionel Phillips Park because, there are people loitering, there's a mess, there's litter, there's waste picking, there's sorting. And what a lot of people concerned about the impact of wastepreneurs and the failure of the city to manage or resolve the issues. People are incredibly frustrated. And the issue of rates boycotts comes up a lot. I'm going to address it here for a minute. Mike might want to talk about it. The advice we've got from the lawyers at various places, and including Outer, is that rates boycotts are very, very tricky. They are expensive, they are legally complicated, and they are really not, this is not the first line of attack or way to go. We really need to try and work with the city to get what we need. So it's not like we haven't thought about it, but it takes a lot of money to start a rates boycott. And we have no money at the moment. So yeah, you need to help us. And we know that we think that the site is a violation of people's rights to a clean, healthy environment, to safety, to dignity, to housing. I mean, all of those things. And lots of the comments were about pleas for help and assistance. And I want to read this that I wrote at the bottom of the petition, that many signatories expressed the hope that by working together with the city and other stakeholders, there is the possibility of rehabilitating the properties and improving the situation. But to do this, there needs to be political will and practical efforts on behalf of the city to work with the affected residents, occupiers, and other stakeholders. And we're also going to need to do our bit as well. So since this petition, it's like suddenly everyone woke up. It was submitted on the 18th of January. We asked that it got reported slightly inaccurately, unfortunately, in News 24, but I have family who are journalists and I know how the media work, but it was in the news. And we did get written acknowledgement, finally, after pursuing that. But and Councillor Tim Trulak did organise an online meeting with ourselves, other ward councillors, including Bridget Steer, and with the Johannesburg Property Company and various other members of the city on the evening of last Thursday night. And they did come to the meeting, which is remarkable. We've had increased correspondence. Mike Rossel particularly has been in telephone calls and WhatsApps with the MMCs, and he can talk about that. We've also met with Pirates last week about wastepreneurs, given the significant number of concerns expressed. And what was absolutely fascinating is suddenly Johannesburg Property Company are on site yesterday. Yesterday, we got site visits and we got there was a big council meeting, the first for the year, and various people, including the MMC for finance, saying, we are engaging. And if any of you want the link, I'll put it on our suburb groups. He was saying, there's no need for a rates boycott, said the MMC, that's the member of the mayoral committee for finance, because he said, we are engaging with our residents. We are going to deliver services. We've been engaging, for example, with Parkhurst Residents Association or Parkhurst Residents. And I know in our group, we all said, who's he been engaging with? No, none of us have heard from him, but they are all claiming to be doing this. And what they all did yesterday was arrive on site, film themselves, look at it, talk about how this property's been hijacked and that they're going to do something about it. Well, let's hope. I just think we need to understand, during lockdown, I found this poem that talks about how hope is a sewer rat. And I want you to all be careful, because hope is important and it's necessary. But if we have too much hope and we don't understand that this work is gritty, ongoing, and will bite us at times, we know that hope is a sewer rat. It's not a pretty little thing with birds. Hope is not a butterfly. Hope is what we have to do to get through the mess. And for example, apparently the fifth tender, there is a preferred bidder, but we have no confirmation. We try to get the Johannesburg Property Company to let us attend their meeting where they were going to announce the bidder. They avoided, I don't know how they got out of it. That was today. But whoever the bidder is, there is such a long process ahead. The bidder has to engage with the city, and we know previous preferred bidders have fallen out. We don't know. So be careful of hoping too much. And whatever does happen, there's going to be a long period where we have to wait, where there is going to be rezoning applications because the land is zoned for community use, for public open space, the area down by the Spruit. And of course, the preferred bidder has to remove the occupiers and provide them with accommodation. I think it's a huge ask. I want to be hopeful, but I'm saying let's not give up our role, because whoever gets the site, we've got to work with to ensure that things happen now, not in a year and a half's time or 2 years' time when they've got their rezoning and they're ready to build or demolish. Things have to happen much quicker. So what next? We're going to ask you all to keep up the pressure. We are going to keep up the pressure on the City of Johannesburg, but we're asking you all, and we're going to communicate this in all our suburbs communication, to record and report all infractions and suspicions and concerns arising from those sites to the correct bodies, whether it's environmental health, JMPD, JRA. We're going to make them not forget about us. They cannot just use us as an electioneering tool, which is clearly what's happening. I mean, we're lucky that the elections are in May, but they are using us as an electioneering tool, the city, and we cannot be fooled. We have to record, report what we're going to do. Mike has already set up a Google document where we're going to be, we've already been collating, but we're going to do it more formally. We're going to be keeping a record of every reference number. It's the most irritating thing in the world to phone JMPD or the city, report something, get a reference number. Please, please, please do it. And send us the reference number and the photographs and the documentation, and we're keeping it. We've got, that's part of what I sent in to the city. We're going to escalate this via the ward councillors. We are not going to let them forget about this. I'm also asking you to join and actively support your residents association and the Parkview CPF. We all need your help. We need your money. We need your, we're going to be like whatever it is a month. We're moving to a monthly subscription as we've joined the Joburg CAN. But I want to remind you, with those of you who've got kids will know, remember the Lorax, who was trying to fight for the environment and to make the world safe and healthy and clean. That unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So it's time for us to get going. Thanks. Okay, so Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Judith. I think you've spoken very comprehensively there, and I have to say, in terms of the petition, definitely did the bulk of the work on that, but I think it's been very, very useful, so thank you. I just think in terms of the order of events, probably I'm going to defer to our friends, Michael Wellbeloved and Greg Mark, who are legal counsel, because I think there's some important context they can give, and I think are building on what Judith was talking about in terms of what is possible. I think it's very important that the people here understand the complexities that are involved, and then I'll come back on afterwards and talk about the next steps and what we're proposing from a fundraising perspective and beyond. So I'll hand over to you, Greg and Mike, and I'll come back on.
Hello. I'm here with Mike. Thank you very much. I think the overview says almost the whole story. What we need to say, and I don't think we'll be long, or we may have questions, I suppose, is that we can't evict people from someone else's property. The only people that can evict from property are the owners or a contracting party in the lease, or the city council. The problem, of course, is we're dealing with the city council as owner, with, as Judith said, all of the political complexities that we are dealing with. Suffice it to say the following: it's 30 years since the first democratic elections, and all of the bylaws, laws, etc., have withstood 30 years of constitutional consideration. The point being, we are entitled, as we are attempting to do, to hold the city to various obligations. The way the litigation worked was as follows. In 2001, the city implemented a very flaccid eviction application. These things are very complicated. It was very ordinary. The inner city, what's it called again? Federation. Inner City Federation, which is a very busy NGO, also linked to an organization called SERI, Socioeconomic Rights Institute, which is an anti-eviction NGO, are very sophisticated in their defense to all evictions, certainly this. Now, what happened was, and I don't think you need all the detail, at that stage, we intervened in the eviction process, sought and obtained an order requiring certain action on the part of the city, and of course, adding a little, hopefully, marrow to the bones of the city. So what you have is the city that doesn't really care whether it evicts people or not. That's in a state of collapse, like almost everything else. That doesn't want to evict people for political reasons in election season. It is now permanent election season. So that's what we're dealing with. And on the other hand, a very competent NGO capable of punting their agenda, and the current NGO agenda is for people like waste pickers, that they also have access to a working space that isn't part of the law at present. It isn't something that the Constitutional Court has said is an obligation on the municipality. But of course, the jobs of the NGOs is to push the agenda of poor or vulnerable people, such as those who occupy the property. So the law, as you guys all know by now, is that if someone would be homeless upon eviction, the municipality in any area has an obligation to provide temporary emergency accommodation. It's not an absolute obligation. If you're evicting a rent payer who's capable of paying rent, they can find accommodation of their own, and the obligation certainly doesn't vest in the private owner, but it vests in the municipality. And we've been dealing with these fights for years. As Judith said, the COVID just stopped the city dead in its tracks. With a mass eviction, we will generally require the city to provide a report as to the personal circumstances of those facing eviction, which of them, if any, are in danger of homelessness, and if there are those in danger of homelessness, where the city will put them and when. Now, come the pandemic, they stopped responding at all for probably 2 years. Then in recent times, there have been reports we cannot provide. We may be able to provide in 3 years or 5 years' time, which is literally just a can kicked down the road, because it's not 3 or 5 years. It's some indeterminate date in the future. Stop bothering me. So that's what we are dealing with. Although there's a sudden flurry of activity now, we are, of course, very cynical. One doesn't drop the ball at all if you can help it, because the authorities will take every opportunity you give them and every bit of time you afford them. So we believe that right now is the time to bring a contempt of court application for the elements, the control elements of the order that we do have, which are not being fulfilled, to enhance those, to wrap the city up into it's called a structured interdict. There are plenty of lawyers, I'm sure, on here. This is what you will do. Floyd Brink, or your successor in title, this is what you will do. And if you don't do it, then you're in contempt of court. Because unfortunately, it's only fear that will ultimately force the authorities to do what they have to do. And that's our thinking. It's the line we take with our own evictions. We get an order, it isn't complied with, we bring a contempt of court order, people start listening to us. So, I think the other thing I need to say to endorse what's been said, we cannot act on this property. Any attempt that anybody does to interfere with the occupation will be stopped in a day. There were talks of raising money, go in, clean it all out, fight the court battle. Doesn't work like that. Every judge in every division in the country, when faced with an illegal eviction, will restore people immediately. So there are no legs in that at all. I don't know, Mike, is there anything else I should be saying now? Anything you want to say?
That's fine.
Okay. There may be questions. The law is clear. The process is murky. The timing, as was said, where one looks to the city to provide temporary emergency accommodation, it is a long process, because the city does not have TEA, temporary emergency accommodation. If a tender is granted, which creates an obligation on the successful tenderer to relocate people, we will immediately join them and make them subject to whatever orders we have regarding the proper disposal of this matter. So, obviously what one would hope is that any successful tenderer would be incentivized to fix the problem quickly. So that's kind of where we are. Our job is relatively easy. I don't know if there's a facility for questions, but if there are, obviously I'm more than happy to take them.
Greg, if I could just say that there's the Q&A tab, and I think the last sort of 3 or 4 questions have been very specific to what you've been talking about. So if you guys wouldn't mind just going through a couple of those, we can deal with the other ones later.
I'm elderly and tech.
Michael, can you help him?
Michael, help me. Let's see. Let's start somewhere, anywhere. Starting is important. Personally, I'm here as a resident willing to contribute. Starting is important because if it's a long process, which it promises to be, the quicker you start, the quicker you finish. So I couldn't agree more. Let's also be mindful of the poverty and unemployment and find sustainable alternatives for all. Most certainly, the whole constitutional imperative in which the courts function is to ensure that vulnerable people are not made more vulnerable. So there's no way, there's simply no way in any circumstances that the people on the ground's personal dignity and ability to be housed will be trammeled at all, especially not with the Inner City Federation at their back. You can rest assured on that. There are no circumstances in which this process is going not to be constitutionally pristine. So you need have no concerns there.
Let me catch you up because I think you're sort of at the early part of the list. I think it really starts with does the city, you guys, given that you are, I think, more involved in this than anyone here, obviously I know who's on the call, but does the city in fact have any candidate sites where these people could be relocated to, i.e. what is the current status of the temporary emergency accommodation? Because I think that is something that needs to be spoken to.
Most of the litigation in the last 15 years has centered around the inner city. And the city's solution has been to identify buildings which they refurbish at massive cost and which really aren't sufficient. There are sites in the south of Johannesburg at the old Turffontein racetrack that people have been relocated to. Some of the victims of the Usindiso fire have been relocated there. There is a lot of resistance to tents. I think the sort of international optics of tent villages are not popular at all, and not only will the city resist them, but the NGO sector will resist them as well. So there is, barring Turffontein, there's almost nothing of which I'm aware. And the difficulty, of course, is you add the waste picker dynamic into it, where a lot of these guys are obviously centered on the refuse site right there. Now, what we in conversation in the firm, we can't believe that the billions of rands of benefit that waste pickers have on the local system can't result in something more formalized for the waste pickers, but that's not going to happen now. With that, okay. Yeah, sorry.
And just to add to what Greg is saying, the difficulties that we're facing with a timing and strategic concern. So we are now at a place where we can launch these proceedings in this matter, but we were involved in proceedings 2 weeks ago because of a judge's concern in the matter. We were pushed back from the provision of temporary emergency accommodation at one of these alternative sites. So a lot of it is a timing and optics thing, and due to the massive amount of correspondence sent to the city over the last months, we are there and we can make the case out. And the city will hopefully ultimately make a new site available.
Do you want to alert me to questions that you want us to answer, Mike?
Yeah, there is another one. And again, I'm not sure it's necessarily germane, but it's just talking about detailing what orders have been granted from the initiatives thus far, i.e. in terms of the legal process, where are we?
We have an order in which we are joined into the legal proceedings and some measure of structured interdict, Mike.
We have an order in terms of which the city was supposed to report on as to the nature of the people residing on the property, whether they qualify for temporary emergency accommodation. If so, what temporary emergency accommodation can and will be provided. And in addition to that, we requested directions from the city as to what they'll do as an interim measure in the event to prevent the nuisance flowing from the property whilst they secure the temporary emergency accommodation. Now, the reason over the past months, the city has partially complied with the order through effectively firstly engaging with us, thereafter conducting a site audit, and thereafter saying they're just awaiting the location of the TA, at which point they'll report. Because of that, we weren't in a position to just run into court on contempt of court, because any judge will say, but Mr. Wellbeloved, they are trying to comply. There's no true breach of this order. And it's that type of thing that the communication that we've been addressing to the city has slowly pushed them into a corner where we can launch for more broad-ranging interdictory relief. Because the indications from the tenders, they have no intention of providing these people with temporary emergency accommodation. In fact, they'd rather push that onto a third party.
Yeah. There's a very interesting question here. What are the prayers for the contempt of court application? The way we normally do it is we approach court and we have the court declare that the city is in contempt of court, but then they have an opportunity to remediate that contempt, failing which we come back to court and look for punitive relief. It may be in prison, it may be a fine. It's a big thing to put the city manager in jail, but it has happened, and that really is our weapon.
Another one, because there's a couple of questions pertaining to the TA still. It's obviously an area that not many people are that familiar with, but basically the gist of the questions, there's been about 4 of them. Can a third party provide space or even the accommodation itself, or is TA defined and under the management of the city?
A third party can provide it. Often what people do is say, we'll provide them a place to live for a year or whatever the case may be. It has to be, it cannot be, how do I put this? It cannot expire. So if anyone assumes that obligation, it will be pending the city fulfilling its obligation in due course. So it's some benefactor could say, well, I will put them up for the 2024 year, whereafter. The problem is with SERI and Inner City Federation, they're too wise for that. They're not going to allow a court to say, yes, there's a temporary solution. I mean, it is called temporary emergency accommodation, but a temporary solution that will put people somewhere, but then that right will expire. They can do it, but it'll then have to push on to either temporary emergency or even permanent accommodation provided by the state. This other questions, the benefits of the Bill of Rights apply to everybody in the country. So even if people are undocumented foreigners, they are entitled to this benefit. One of the things we've fought over the last year or so is the city saying, well, we have no obligation to undocumented foreigners, and we require the Department of Home Affairs to assist, which they don't. So we're busy having a fight about that at the moment. But technically, we're not going to, the example I always give is I'm an undocumented German immigrant. Mike's a South African. The police can't come rushing in here and beat me up because I'm not local. The Bill of Rights applies to everybody. The right to temporary emergency accommodation or not to be homeless applies to everybody. So there's no particular angle in that, if that's the subject to the question.
All right, I think that covers the bulk of the legal questions for now. I think clearly to everyone listening, there are likely to be others that spring to mind. We are in the process of just finalizing what our communication channel will look like. There's obviously a reporting communication channel for collating all of the issues that are reported to the city. Once you have a reference number, there will be, I think we will look at some of the questions that have come through today, and perhaps we'll write a note, one that follows. But I think we need to move on now, because I'm conscious that we probably have about 25 minutes left before the lights go out for the bulk of us. All right, hi guys, and thanks Greg and Michael. We'll let you go now. You can turn your camera off. Right, so just a recap after this immense presentation. Mike Rosholt, the chairperson of the Parkhurst Residents and Business Owners Association, PRABOA, alongside GRA and Emmarentia and the CPF. We've been tackling this, and actually Judith didn't really put it right. We actually started this in September 2022. It has been a very, very long process and an incredibly frustrating one. I think you got that you would have picked that up from Judith. Not made any easier by, I think, the lack of understanding of how the city works, why it doesn't work, why some of the avenues that seem the most obvious don't work. And I hope that between Judith and Greg, people have a better idea around this. So it's really my job just to wrap things up in terms of where we want to go and what comes next. I think it's important to acknowledge that the RFP 5 is out there and is supposedly being awarded. Again, after a very opaque meeting with JPC, finally after nearly a year of requesting one, all we were able to get a bead on was the process to follow. And that is that even with the award being made supposedly today, where we were supposedly allowed to see that, and we weren't, that's not the end of it. The award may be made, and then there's, I think, a lot of kicking around between various departments as to what's actually being proposed. There are a lot of question marks over how that site can be developed, given that it is actually a landfill. The fields sit on top of what was once a landfill. Whoever is going to develop there is going to have to do some very interesting geotechnical work and pile driving to make that into a mixed-use development, which is what supposedly it's going to be. And so I think the only message that we can give is that, alongside what Judith said around hope, is that we have to continue regardless. Whether all the flurry of activity was designed to head us off at the pass, because this has been fairly well publicized, it's not for me to say. But I think it's pretty obvious, given the history of the site, that it's unlikely this will come to pass anytime soon. And so we're going to continue. And so there are a number of things that we are going to need funding for, unfortunately. Obviously, these things fall to the city in terms of them being the owners. And I've been led to believe by legal that if things go really swimmingly and according to that, there may be a cost award at some stage, which would allow us to recoup any of the funds spent, but we're not going to bank on that. This is ultimately going to be about donations and volunteering from all the stakeholders. We are looking at, Judith, if you wouldn't mind coming on, just because you're the only person that seems to be able to share my screen. I'm a little bit younger than you, but probably a lot less technically astute. And so all you need to do is share your screen, I think.
Yeah, I forgot to look for it. Sorry. Which email did you send it to? My GRA email?
Yes, your GRA email. Anyway, while you're doing that, let me talk to it.
Yes.
There are a couple of things that we are looking to raise funds for. And I think some of the questions here are very specific to that. We don't anticipate that site, even if there were to be an eviction order granted, which is obviously an ongoing legal issue, that the cleaning of that site would happen easily. We know that when Crum have been there, which is one of the city entities, ostensibly to do a cleanup, one flatbed goes in, takes a few pieces of sheet metal and plastic bags away, and really there's been nothing. So we are anticipating that at the very least there would have to be a very substantial cleanup on site that would probably follow the securing of the site. As you know, there's a fence on the Victory Road side. It is actually in reasonable order. There are a couple of sections that need repair, and there are obviously some gates there that need to be manned. And so in terms of the securing of the site, there we go. Thank you. Oh, it's gone very small. But anyway, It's there. In terms of the securing of the site, the efforts to fence in that site would probably focus on the lower side of the fields and the Spruit, because that really is the real free access, not necessarily from Victory Road. We have been engaging with at least 2 potential donors on the securing of the site. That is not, it's not a little bit of money. I think we've gotten some quotes, and we've obviously recently just fenced, or we've just fenced Verity Park, so, and the 6th Street Bridge. So we know what this is likely to cost. We're talking about nearly 1 kilometer's worth of fencing. So when I talk about fencing half versus full, there are the 2 sections that are almost equidistant. There's the Victory Road side, which I don't think needs quite as much attention, and there's the lower side, which does. But these are some of the estimates we got. We obviously, as PRABOA, work with an NGO called Babeli. Babeli are responsible for cleaning Verity, cleaning the Spruit on off days, cleaning 4th Avenue. Obviously, it's a function of how much money we have, which is not a huge amount at the moment because we don't have a lot of donations or subscribers. Hopefully that will change soon. But we know that that comes in, you know, at roughly 1,500 Rand for a 5-man team for a day. We anticipate many, many days work on that site. There's obviously the fencing, which we hope to have major donors cover. There's, as I said, there are a number of conversations on that. Judith mentioned that Michael and Greg had been working pro bono up until now, which they have, and we're very grateful. But the reality is we've probably exhausted that. As the legal process now shifts into gear, which is very much the sort of structural interdict that was being spoken about there, there's likely to require a lot more attention. And thus there will be some fees payable both to VMK and the advocates that we use. Those are capped for now on the assumption that the matter is unopposed by the city, which apparently is quite often the case. Obviously that changes to the extent that that becomes opposed, and any ongoing legal costs will have to be scrutinized and negotiated quite heavily. What we don't want to get to a situation with donors' money is an ongoing legal battle that's unlikely to have any solid outcome. I think there's a very focused legal strategy, and we're not going to expand that beyond what's been discussed at this stage, because I think, frankly, then things become very expensive. In addition to the once-off costs, which I've got there, which are now, we're estimating between 660,000 and 1.2 million. I think it'll be less based on the donors we've got for the fence, but they're going to have to be engaged, and we don't know. But there's also going to be ongoing security issues there. I mean, we can have the best fence in the world, but if there's no one on site actually making sure that that site is secure, it won't be long before that fence just becomes part of a construction somewhere. And so we have engaged, I think, 4 security companies so far. We'd like to push that a bit more to get a sense of what 4 permanent guards with backup radios, etc., on sites is likely to cost. And the range is quite big, but it's going to be over 100,000 Rand a month and up to sort of 165. That's on the assumption that we have 4 guards. And then there's going to be ongoing clearing. Again, we don't know how long this will be for, is the sad reality. In terms of the development, there is, as Judith mentioned, and I think Greg as well, there are applications to rezone that site that are going to be required by whoever wins the award and whichever development is chosen. And these things can take time. They also provide us with an opportunity to get involved if we're a bit concerned about how that's going, because there's obviously a public participation element in that, and we will use every resource we have at our disposal to ensure that that goes at least transparently and above board, which has not been the case with the property to date. And so we're very keen that we do that. But the ongoing costs would really just be around the security and making sure that the site is kept clear. Between 100 and 170,000, or 180,000 Rand a month. So these numbers are not small, is the reality. And yes, we can talk about these being the responsibility of the city and its various entities, but there's very little that we can do if we get told there's no budget for this. I mean, obviously we will fight that, and again, we would prefer to do this with the city. Ultimately, even if there is a new lease on that property and it is awarded and developed, it remains the city's property, and ultimately they're going to need to come to the party. But we can't wait another 2 or 3 years in terms of how that's going to work. And given the amount of people that are arriving there almost daily, let's call it weekly, it's time that we started getting involved. And so the legal process will now step up a gear. We anticipate that that may take some time, and if, touch wood, in the interim the city does clear the sites, and again, that's on the presumption that there's an eviction order granted. I'm not sure how they would do it otherwise, but then we would probably need to step in quite quickly thereafter, or frankly alongside them, to secure the property and make sure that there's security on site. The cleaning and the clearing could come shortly thereafter, and that really is what we're looking for. We are PRABOA is a registered NPO, and we've agreed amongst the various members of SOS that we will be collecting any of those donations. We have a treasurer who's willing to do that. It's not necessarily an easy job to do the recon, but we've agreed that we will do that. We are able to offer Section 18A tax certificates for sizable donations. If you are able to do that in your personal capacity, or believe that you are a corporate stakeholder who is also able to do that, please get in touch with us. There's a bit of a process to issuing those things. It's not necessarily a click of a button, and so we would welcome that, obviously, but that's really where we are at this stage. In terms of the next steps, as I said, there needs to be some communication with regards to how to donate both money but also volunteer. I think at this stage we're looking for volunteers that have some experience, obviously when it comes to project management, and really just have some time on their hands. There's quite a lot of work around stakeholder engagement on this, obviously city liaison. These are some of the issues that we have. The city's not particularly responsive, and so it requires lots and lots of letters. So to the reporting. So if that's you, and you're possibly unable to make a financial donation, that would be really, really appreciated too. As Judith alluded to, we are small committees. There's about 8 of us on this one, but it's a very, very big job. And it's been going on quite a long time. So the more help we can get, the better. I know that there were a bunch of WhatsApp groups started in the last couple of weeks as things really started to spiral. And I think quite a lot of interested parties there. And so this is really an opportunity for them to put their hands up and come and help out. But really, in terms of our core team, I think we've got the bones of it. It's really just a case of being able to do something with the money that's donated. And the reality is, if we can't raise this money, then that's kind of it. We're at the mercy of the city. And as we've seen, it's been, well, maybe 10 years of it so far. And I'm not sure how much quicker it can be resolved. A question was raised earlier, because obviously these are donations, as to what would happen if, touch wood again, a miracle occurred, that site was cleared in accordance with the Constitution and the laws, and secured by the new lessees or lessors, and effectively leaving us with a bunch of donations. Well, I think, as we've said, we've chosen to focus on the bowling club because it's really sort of, in terms of the heat map, the one that we have to right now. But there are a number of adjacent issues and adjacent properties that SOS, which is our broad grouping, would like to focus on. There's the Keith Fleming Park. There's the bottom of the Spruit, where Victory Park and the site that we're talking about now come together. It really is a pigsty, and often so. And so there would be clearing activities, possibly security companies in there, just to make sure that there's less interlopers and certainly less waste picking going on there. This really is a function of scrutiny more than anything. And so no money donated would be wasted. Obviously, we would write a report and make that available to anyone that donated. With regards to how the money is spent, it's going to be accounted for very, very clearly and very closely. But obviously, there are a number of issues to deal with. It's not just the bowling club, though that is clearly what we're going to focus on now. So I think I'm going to pause there. I'll ask Judith just to let me know if there's anything I haven't dealt with.
No, I think it was really thorough, and I've been trying to respond to some of the questions in the Q&A. I think this is really the first of a series of engagements. People ask about communications. Obviously, there's suburb newsletters, there's Facebook pages, WhatsApp groups. The GRA are migrating to our new platform with the CAN, and we're going to be asking people for recurring subscriptions to fund us. We were also a lot of people asked about having like a centralized logging system. That is something that Wolfgang Phoenix is trying to establish on that SOS website. As soon as there's like an app or a logging, we will let you know. But thank you.
And again, just to reiterate, thanks for everyone on the stat. I think we managed to keep about 80% of you for an hour 48. So well done. This is clearly a big issue for everyone. Please, guys, support your RAs wherever you may be, whether you're in Emmarentia, Parkhurst, Greenside, Parktown North. We are really at the stage with the city now where we really all have to start getting more involved. And for many, we all work, we're all volunteers, we don't have spare time, but it is an opportunity to start helping your RAs. The RAs are not just dealing with the bowling club, they are dealing with the electricity issues that continue to plague us, the parks that are neglected, the roads that are a problem. And believe me, you know, not seeing potholes fixed, I think drives all of us wild. But the reality is we don't have the budget to go after these things. You read about many small towns where people are doing it for themselves. That's exactly where we'd like to get to. And I think we certainly have the wherewithal to do that. But we can't do it without money. That is just the reality. These things cost money. And yes, back to the rates boycott issue, of course, it's unfair that we have to pay rates and we get absolutely nothing for it. That is an argument, I think, to come later. And as things continue to deteriorate in the city, I can't believe that will be off the table, no matter how much we get threatened by the MMC of Finance. But it's not our fight right now. What we need is help from the residents. And again, you know, I can only talk to Parkhurst, but there are 2,000 households in Parkhurst and over 200 registered businesses. It's not a lot of money if everyone helps. It becomes really daunting looking at the numbers that we put together for this once-off on the site and the ongoing monthly if it's left to a few. And that really has been the story of all our efforts to date. We have some very solid donors, but you can't continually ask the same people or the same organizations or companies to pony up when actually a subscription model is a lot better for all of us. It allows us to plan. It allows us to hire some permanent resources because it's becoming really burdensome from an administrative perspective. And so please try and make contact with your RAs wherever you may be. This is our new reality. And as Judith said, there will be a number of other engagements on this and we'll make sure to report back. But I think for now, this is it. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. And thanks for whoever hosted this platform. Mike, who's run it for us? It's been fantastic.
That's Brad, who's our IT chap who's helped us in a pinch, and he's done a good job. Thank you, Brad.
Absolutely brilliant, Brad. Thank you so much. Like a really awesome platform. Thank you.
Guys, can I just ask that we maybe just share that slide, Brad, with the QR code of where people can donate? Everyone's asking on the platform, so while everyone wants to give us a bit of money, we can do that, unless you want me to share.
I think Teresa will do both. So we'll post it for those that are left, but it will go out to everyone broadly now. I mean, we've got a fairly hefty database now, and it'll be coming in emails. And you know, we'll try not to spam you, but believe me, we're going to send it more than once. And hoping you guys can help. Thanks.
Okay. You can just do that Zapper code there. That's great. Thanks, Brad. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Brad. Enjoy your evening.